Represent the 10-ball mob squad.
What up, party people? Welcome back to another episode of Hood Talk. Let's get it. Today's news in the hood, I will be letting y'all know how female deputies be slick side bringing that contraband in. Get your popcorns ready. It's gonna be a good one, y'all. Listen, man. It ain't no secret. I'm gonna cut straight to it. Sit back, like I said, get your popcorns ready, and enjoy the episode. And check this out. I'm gonna let this lady explain to y'all how they get that contraband in. Yeah, they bring it in just like that, just that simple.
Really bad week at Scrubs where we found 3 men hanging in the same week. I remember walking past his cell and just having a feeling that maybe I should look in. And I could just see his legs dangling. And the worst bit about that wasn't the ligature and it wasn't his neck. He just screamed at me, "Let me die." So I grew up in a rural part of Cambridgeshire, deep in the fens. Not a whole lot going on there, nice and chilled. Had a really great childhood, loved school. I don't remember ever thinking about prison when I was younger. It's certainly not the kind of thing that I imagine most people think, oh, one day I'll want to be a prison officer. I never had that thought myself. But having said that, I was into true crime. I was interested in that kind of thing. I think I was curious probably as I got older, and you perhaps read a bit more about prisons or you hear things in the news. But what was interesting to me was the stories of it. I love people's stories. I'm really interested in real life stories, and I always have been. That's definitely my kind of thing. And that's one thing you can say about prison and the people inside, both staff and prisoners, is that those places are just full of stories and real life and the real world, even though that's not very palatable for some people, but that's the truth of it.
How did you come to work in prison?
So after I finished school, I went to uni for a bit and I hated it. The culture, everything just wasn't for me. So I stayed a couple of months, spent my entire student loan and left. And I remember feeling a bit lost. I wasn't really sure what I was meant to be doing. I worked in my friend's bar for a couple of years, which was fun, but I just didn't really feel like I was meant to be there. I didn't feel like I was contributing much, or, I'd had bigger kind of ambitions for myself, but I didn't really know where that lay. And so I thought I would volunteer at the Young Offenders, or I'd apply to volunteer. I think I was 19 at this point, had a couple of weeks training, and then I started on a mentoring program with Young Offenders. So it was quite basic things like helping people talk about employment, learning to write a CV, measuring your income and outgoings, that kind of thing. But once I settled into that mentoring role, I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed being there. It was probably the highlight of my week.
And why did you decide to go for official kind of role as a prison officer?
So I had seen some of the prison officers working at Little Hay in Peterborough. They were just so smart. They were so emotionally intelligent. They could read the room in seconds. They knew the people they were working with really well. It just gave me a much bigger insight into what that job's really about. And it is about building relationships with people, being able to pick up on the tiniest things, becoming really attuned to your environment, seeing things that volunteers like me would never see, would never know to look for. And I was really impressed by it. And it was the first time I thought maybe that's something I could do. When I applied to be a prison officer, back then they would assign you to the jail you were going. And I was like 99% sure they'll assign me to Little Hay because that was where I'd been for a long time. But instead they assigned me to Whitemoor, which is a high security category A men's dispersal prison in Cambridgeshire, which was the last place I wanted to go. I can remember really well that first day. And I remember the uniform is just not designed for women. And I remember my trousers were too short and my boots were massive and the jacket was just knee length. And I was so nervous. And at that prison, then you would queue up outside and wait to go in. So it's really intimidating from the get-go because everything is obviously about security. So there's dogs and they're huge dogs and they're not very nice. And there's big signs everywhere saying don't go within 8 foot of these dogs. And then people would be whispering in my ear, actually leave it about 10, 12 feet. And there's loads of staff. There's these huge red alarm bells on the wall. There's signs everywhere saying no guns, no bombs allowed. Pretty obvious. But the whole thing, it just reminds you constantly of where you are. And to be honest, the first 6 months of that job, I just hated. I was so nervous just getting out of my car and going in and walking on the wing. And when they'd shout unlock, I'd be there with my key. It can be a really scary environment when you're not familiar with it. And I was 22 at the time and had thought that this was what I really wanted to do. And then I get there and I thought maybe not.
What were the types of crimes that the prisoners you were working with in this high security prison had committed?
So high secure, I think the minimum sentence on my wing was around, well, the majority of them were serving around 25 to 30 years for life. So that's minimum tariffs. A few were serving natural life sentences, so whole life. So it's as you'd expect. It's things like murder, multiple murder, terrorism, organized crime, that kind of thing. You know, there are some people who they've done the worst of the worst. You know, they are those guys, some of them. And they kind of acted the part as well. A few of them, not many. And I think, though, intellectually, rationally, I know there is no such thing as evil. On an emotional level, when you sometimes are up close with those people and you see the way they carry themselves, and some people have a real attitude of contempt for the system, for everyone around them. But after a while, I kind of lost interest. You know, initially it was a bit of a case of, I think I've seen this person on the news. I'm pretty sure there's a documentary about that person. But very quickly it becomes where you go to work. It's literally your workplace and these other people that you work with. And all those sort of extenuating factors, they just kind of fade into the background. And I lost interest in that, really. I was more interested in the actual people as opposed to the things that they'd done.
How long were you there for then?
I was there for about 3 years. And then I went for promotion for a senior officer role at Wormwood Scrubs in West London. I wanted to get out of my little rural town and go somewhere else. So it was a massive culture shock for me. For a start, it's enormous. Whitemore only held around 400 men. Scrubs held over 1,300 at that time. And it housed everyone. So young offenders, adults, short-termers, lifers, people on remand, sentenced. It was a real mix. And over time, that became a real toxic mix. And it's a really old building. So it was built in the 1800s. The infrastructure is challenged. Some of the real contemporary features of prisons like Whitemore, so things like steel window cages on cell windows, they don't have them. Things fluctuated a lot of Scrubs. The whole prisoner population was estimated to turn over in about 10 weeks then. So you had a really fluid in and out all the time. It was a really, really busy jail, which keeps you busy as a member of staff, but it comes with a lot of challenges as well.
Wormwood's got a fairly bad reputation, or it's kind of like notorious, isn't it? Why do you think it's got that reputation?
I think Scrubs had a reputation then just because it's held some really famous people. I mean, I say famous, notorious people like Ian Brady and those kind of individuals were there. George Blake, he escaped from Scrubs. It's been in a lot of like pop culture. I think it was in poetry, literature, films. It's got a very iconic gatehouse. So I think that probably helps contribute to its notoriety. And for the first year at Scrubs, busy, far more incidents in the first, I'd say, 2 months at Scrubs than I ever had in the years I'd been at Whitemore. But it was much more a reflection of what the actual prison system is like.
And what were the kinds of instances that you were dealing with, Alex?
All the things you'd realistically expect to encounter in that first year we came across. So lots of fights, a few staff assaults, but not that many. Unfortunately, a lot of self-harm. The first year, it was quite typical for that kind of thing. There was loads of phones. I remember sometimes I'd come on in the morning and you'd hear phones ringing. Phones, obviously, you're not allowed to have a phone in prison, and you'd hear the mobile phones ringing. Or you'd come in the morning and you'd smell the drugs. And that was new to me. So Whitemore wasn't like that. And because we had so much more resources there, if there had been any intelligence of drugs and phones, you could really jump on that there. But at Scrubs, you were surrounded by it.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed the episode, and until next time, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be alerted when I upload some more videos. If you know someone that's struggling with mental health, mental illness, do not be afraid to offer them your assistance. Superfly Entertainment presents We're Not the Talk, we're Hood Talk.
STP, STP.